Welcome back to Lokad. So, Joannes, today we're here again to discuss, honestly, the topic that just keeps on giving these days, AI. In particular, we're sitting here because there appears to be something of an international frenzy in terms of AI investment, involving genuinely eye-watering amounts of both, to be fair, private, but also huge amounts of public funding into AI infrastructure. So, top of the hour, what's your hot take on all of this?
So what I saw in the news is the Trump administration announcing a few days ago a $500 billion investment. And then, and it was, I think, just 2 days ago, the European Union answered, was saying, well, if they do that, then we will have our 200 billion euro investment in AI. My general take on that is that, and I think, being French is quite relevant, because the interesting thing is that France has been playing this game for decades. In fact, it has a name for it in French. It's called État stratège, that like the strategist states. So, and based on the track record of France playing this sort of game, I can say with, I would say, high confidence that the quasi-totality of this money will be wasted. Period.
So if I not to cut you off, but I do feel the need to just jump in immediately to provide just a little bit of context here, because it's I don't want to simplify it to the point where it sounds like President Trump or Ursula von der Leyen is spending, are spending almost $1 trillion of public money. So just to clarify, I do have some details on screen. For at least at time of speaking, which is the 13th of February, Trump a few days ago clarified the $500 billion, mostly private sector investment. That's Stargate, the conglomeration between OpenAI, Oracle, and SoftBank in Japan. SoftBank is a Japanese company. And Ursula von der Leyen, president of the European Commission, announced 200 billion. I believe again the most recent figures, 150 was private, 50 million or so euros, 50 billion, or so, coming from public funding. So the pattern is very clear: enormous sums of both private and public money. But it's not just public money being spent here, to be clear.
Yes, but again, France has been playing this sort of games, État stratège, for decades. So it's always the same pattern. They would justify that they have private investors. But the reality is that concessions will be made so that in the form of tax breaks or plenty of other things. So the cost is real, and the cost is really will be heavily concentrated on, I would say, taxpayers. The interesting thing is that why those projects fails is that it is extremely difficult to deploy large amount of money efficiently. So either those projects were already going to happen. So you see here, it's just a matter of announcement. You just take a company that was already going to invest, and you just claim that investment as part of your grand strategy for your country. But then if it was already going to happen anyway, why do you need to put this investment into a basket and say, oh, it's our strategic investment? So the reality is that usually you end up in very bureaucratic settings with consortiums where you have so many companies, who band together. I mean, just look at what succeed generally on the market. What we see is almost invariably it's not consortiums. The iPhone is a great success, but the iPhone was not the produce of Apple making like a joint venture with Google, Facebook, and whoever. It's not. It was a great success, but it was not I would say some sort of consortium. Same thing, OpenAI was widely successful with ChatGPT, but ChatGPT was not like the product of a consortium, etc., etc. I mean, the list goes on, but generally speaking, when I see this sort of, when I look at the sort of patterns, again, État stratège has been, a gameplay that has been going on for decades, more like half a century in France. you would just take whatever the buzzword of the day happens to be. Then you will get around the table influential names, big companies. Then you would add, tons of public money to justify the fact that private companies will make their money. You will give tons of concessions, tax breaks, and whatnot. And also, you end up with a game that is highly asymmetrical, because the reality is that the funds promised by the administration will materialize very frequently, while a private participant will just pull back. So you see, it's what may very well be is that when you have, let's say, administration Trump that say 500 billion, a potential scenario is all the people who are, all the private investors just pull back if the things just start to be nonsensical, and yet billions of public money just end up being spent.
I should point out that, again, from my read of the situation, I think it was 100 billion was promised up front by the Trump administration, with obviously the promise of 400 billion more. But I mean, to be fair, anyone familiar with large signings in football knows that 200 million is not, no one paid 200 million up front for a player. And it's partitioned out.
The interesting thing is that software is really not an area where it's very easy to deploy capital. Even and it's like maddeningly difficult if you want to deploy this large amount of money. So that's why they're framing that as infrastructure. But even infrastructure, what does that even mean?
Exactly,
because the problem is that the chips, you would say, oh, we need chips. Okay, but which sort of chips? It depends on the algorithm. So we have LLMs. We have the LLMs of 2025. Those LLMs are very different from the sort of models, machine learning models that were en vogue 5 years ago. So what makes you think? And those were also extremely different from those that were en vogue 5 years before again. So what makes you think that 5 years from now, the models that will be en vogue will be reflecting the same sort of requirement than the one that we have today? It's a very risky proposition.
To be fair, again, to jump in, because my understanding is it's not only chips. Again, my understanding, the Stargate Alliance aim to build at least 20 data centers, most of them in Texas, and the European Commission promised to build 12 AI hubs and a bunch of supercomputers. But to me, the question then is, before we talk about why these projects fail, which they may very well, my question is, the preceding question is, what is the ultimate goal? What are people trying to accomplish? And we can talk about why it fails. What is the ultimate goal of building all of these data centers and supercomputers and AI hubs and deploying all of this money, however poorly? What is the ultimate goal there?
I mean, on paper, it's like a super vague, let's become an AI superpower. But what does it even mean?
Exactly. That's what I'm asking.
That's the problem. Nobody knows. I mean, those communications are super vague. You end up with, an AI superpower means having access to the most ethical AI. Okay, what does that mean? The most sustainable AI. I have no clue what it means. I mean, communications are just incredibly vague. And it's always the case. Again, whenever France has tried that with État Stratège, the communications are always by necessity extremely vague, because you're bringing companies that are extremely diverse, that don't have the same strategies, that have very little in common. I mean, you're bringing Oracle and SpaceX, and you expect that those people have anything in common. This is nonsense. So I think a large amount of participants know that it's complete nonsense. But when you have like a third party who promised to pour billions of dollars or euro on you, why not? It would be a mistake to not just say, okay, if you're willing to waste such a large amount of money, at least waste it on me. And then if we go into specific challenges like supply chain, it's even less clear that it makes any sense at all, because if we talk of AI in supply chain, we could give it a very specific meaning, which would be the unintended execution of supply chains for all the mundane decision-making processes that happen in supply chains. So that would
It's a
be
clear thesis statement of what you want.
and so we have extremely labor-intensive decision-making processes. So when do I order? How much do I order? Do I move my price up or down? Do I move this inventory here or there? Do I increase capacity or decrease capacity of all the things that may present a capacity limit, etc., etc. Okay, fine. And you can certainly mechanize that with something that would be, akin to AI somehow. But again, is the bottleneck of that access to
Huge
AI,
amounts of money.
or do you need a lot of computational power? Do you need data centers? And is there any sign that data centers that we have are truly the bottleneck? That's also because the thing is, when it comes to investing in data centers, there has been no shortage of investment. Microsoft, Google, Amazon have been relentlessly investing in data centers to cover the globe of data centers. So my take is that yes, we can. If Amazon thinks that they need more data centers, I'm perfectly okay with that. They would just invest and produce more data centers. Same thing for Microsoft, same thing for Google, and all the rest. What really baffles me is the idea that using that, I would say, interfering with this process with those like mega investment is just going to make those markets more efficient. For me, that's a very, very, I would say, misguided take, especially for something like AI that is so many dimensional. I mean, it's very difficult to see exactly what is missing, what the market will look like, what the technologies will look like 5 years from now. Well, it is extremely blurry. It's not like invest $1 billion on this and you will get the result that you want. It is the situation is much more fuzzy than that.
Well, again, when you talk about just throwing lashings of money, again, be it public or private, at AI infrastructure, it's more interesting, or it's quite interesting in the context of my knowledge of DeepSeek. So, for example, DeepSeek was produced. Not only does it use less energy than ChatGPT's O1 model, but apparently was something like a fraction of the cost to deploy. Yes. Something like 25 to 30 times cheaper. So the idea that the response to... Now, we can get into the weeds about how was it produced, was it plagiarized. It's not the point. The point was infrastructurally, it was produced for significantly less than it took to produce the O1 model. And then how is the response to that? We'll take $500 billion and we'll throw it at the problem.
Yes, and the interesting thing is that Mistral, a French company, had pretty much made the same sort of claims than DeepSeek, about a year ago, saying, you know what, those LLMs, what we have right now, they are quite wasteful. We can most likely achieve comparable results, if not better, with just a tiny fraction of the computing resources. Mistral, and the interesting thing is that it was already the position of Mistral, but suddenly, which was a French company, but suddenly when it was a Chinese company doing the exact same thing, the markets lost their mind. So my take was, well, it's nice to see a market correction, but fundamentally it illustrates the fact that generally speaking, with software technologies, the path, the progress is extremely chaotic. It's very difficult to know years in advance what will succeed. It's very difficult to know how to deploy capital effectively. That's why, by the way, it's very interesting. If you look at very successful startup incubators, like let's say Y Combinators, they have literally pioneered the approach of spread money super wide, like takes thousands of startups, deploy a little bit of capital, like $500,000 for each company, and see what pops up. And this sort of approach seems to be what generally works in the software industry, as opposed to let's take a champion and pour billions on this champion. historically speaking, when you look at companies, investors who have been playing this like mega investment approaches, like SoftBank suffered massive losses on WeWork. So I mean, they deployed.
That is an interesting case study.
They started with a 100 billion fund, and they wasted something like tenth of billions on WeWork.
Well, WeWork wasn't even a software company.
I mean, they were presented.
But it was essentially a rental agency.
But that's the problem: is that when you say we want to invest on AI, and here is billions of dollars, I would say hundreds of billions of dollars for that. Rest assured that every single company is going to present, that has the capacity to capture those funds, is going to present themselves as an AI company. To my knowledge, for example, Oracle has like nothing to do with AI. They have not been a contributor in this field. I'm not even sure if they have ever done anything of remotely relevant in the field of machine learning, but I mean, they probably did because they are very large. But the reality is that now they are branding themselves as an AI company. And I'm pretty sure that there will be plenty of other companies that have, again, very weak track records in these areas that will join the bandwagon. I'm pretty sure if I were to say, to guess, I would say probably Salesforce will probably join them. Again, that's the problem is that you have when we look at AI, the question is that what is missing, and clearly there is tons of things that are missing. And if we want to even apply that to AI for supply chain, there are tons of things that are missing, but capital, really, after years of quantitative easing where we had literally the easiest access to capital in probably human history, I do not think that, at least as an entrepreneur, that the lack of funds was really the problem. What I see, generally speaking, when I look at the AI market, what I see is that, on the contrary, an overabundance of funds, even when I just look at the private funds. So if you pile on top of that public ones, you're just going to double down on the problem of overabundance of cash, generally speaking.
You've drawn a parallel there to startups and the sort of venture capitalist haze or frenzy that descends when people are around tech companies. I don't know if you meant it explicitly, but were you applying that same framework to what governments, like countries, are doing? So we're talking about Japan, France, the US. You're drawing a parallel there to the kinds of behavior that saw enormous tech companies, individual tech companies, burn hundreds of millions and billions. Are you equating these actions?
No, what I'm saying is that deploying capitals is extremely difficult, and it is extremely difficult for private companies.
To spend it properly.
To spend it properly,
is easy.
Yeah, spending is easy, but to spend it profitably is extremely difficult. And when you look at even private companies, like SoftBank, at best you can say it's hit or miss. It's not clear that those, if you look at in aggregate, that's a point that was made by Warren Buffett many times. Most of the times, those funds end up underperforming the market. So with just a basic ETF, you would get better returns. Now, my worries is that if you add, you have this problem of or challenge of it's very difficult to deploy capital in AI. It is even more difficult to deploy gigantic amount, because the larger the parts that you want to deploy, the more challenging it becomes. And now you compound the problem by having a series of governments who are creating all sort of bureaucratic nightmares that are waiting to happen on having like consortiums and whatnot, which historically those things have been proven time and again. Again, France has a very long history of those things to deliver a lot of waste. It's again, if if the État stratège was a sure thing to get rich, France would be like the richest country on earth. It's nowhere close. I mean, those things failed invariably, all of them.
Well, if I can just jump in on that point, because again, when you're talking about financial waste, obviously that's our métier, understanding what you get, what the ROI is for every dollar spent. To stitch together this point with a previous comment that you've made before related to supply chain, you previously gave the example of the three systems of enterprise software, and the first one is a system of records, and that's essentially your ERP. And you made the point before that. Again, it's anecdotal, but let's just say, in most of the companies that you can find, companies will dedicate approximately 3/4 of their IT budget to what is essentially a glorified ledger, a spreadsheet. In essential terms, a spreadsheet. Like, I'll spend tens of millions of euros on spreadsheets. Fine. And your position there, typically, and I'm summarizing it, is that's not particularly wise. Okay. But some amount of money needs to be spent on that, because you do need a thing. Some amount of money, and you made the point, maybe 5% is appropriate. Okay, well, taking that same sort of financial lens, obviously states, governments need to spend some amount of money on AI infrastructure. $500 billion is maybe overkill, but what's an appropriate amount?
But I really challenge this idea of why should, on topics like that, governments spend any money? It seems like the recipe, tons with this project, tons of American taxpayer will be wasted. I don't mind.
And European.
I'm not paying my taxes in the US. But then apparently the Europe is catching up, and so they just want to waste tons of European tax money on that. And I will be impacted. You see, it's, for me, what is very strange is that, why do you think that in the first place government should even be involved in that? It's very strange. Is it something where probably you need the support of government? It's, for me, if you look at the entire history of let's say computer science, especially when it comes to those elusive things like artificial intelligence, none of those things ever emerge from let's say bureaucratic entities run by governments. The progress is very incremental. It's incredibly dispersed geographically. It can be. We have seen with DeepSeek, a team of quants in China may push the state of the art forward, and next time it can be another team in Germany, in Sweden, anywhere. So. And again, I challenge the idea that here what we need is lack of funds, because clearly there is abundance of funds. So if you think that states should get involved because there is not enough funds, as an entrepreneur in the software business, I would say think again. I am personally contacted probably like 5 times a day by a venture capitalist who wants to invest in Lokad. Lacking funds is not the problem. You have all the capital that you want. But for me, even considering myself, with some degree of expertise, if you give me even $100 million on AI, it is very unclear where this money should be invested. It is a very, very difficult proposition. So let's compound that into $100 billion. Oof, that's a problem. That is. So my take is that those sort of mega investments are like a distraction. There are going to be a lot of waste, but there are also going to be a lot of distractions for all the parties involved.
Okay. Well, again, to tease apart the idea that states, whether or not states should be involved or whether or not they have an interest in this, there is a point to be made. And again, I am not an expert. I teach philosophy and I work in marketing at Lokad. However, I have read Nick Bostrom's book, Superintelligence, and I am aware that's about 10 or 11 years old. So when he wrote that and he outlined the potential, I know we're not talking about superintelligence, so bear with me. The idea being, though, that most people don't know what superintelligence is. Most people don't know how close we are or are not to that. What they know is, exactly. But that's my point. That there is still, though, the potential, as outlined by Bostrom, the the devastating impact of being on the wrong side of a nation that has that. So my question is, how much of this is essentially a state level, not necessarily FOMO, but fear of not developing this infrastructure sufficiently relative to potential enemies?
But what makes you think that, again, the government has, or anybody in all of those governments, because it's like a coalition of governments, has any clue to answer this question?
Well,
no, that's the thing.
Exactly.
AI is not, we are not discussing something like very simple, like let's build a gigantic wall, to defend ourselves. Something that would be very tangible, where there is a goal that is clear. The perspective. We are talking of something that is incredibly elusive. I mean, just imagine. Let's replace AI by a contest where let's write the best novel, most poetic, most interesting, most captivating. Do you really think that you could pour billions and billions, the country that would pour the most money on the problem on this challenge would actually mechanically get the best novel? I think no. I mean, it's you would certainly get a lot of people who would be taking part of this contest, but it would immediately devolve into some kind of bureaucratic nightmare that has like no chance whatsoever to let something beautiful emerge. It's, again, AI is incredibly elusive. Part of the problems that we have with LLMs is that we don't really understand the nature of the limitations. If we understood the nature of the limitation, what is truly blocking us from achieving, general artificial intelligence, we would have a development path that would be clear. The problem is that, and that has been happening, over and over in the last 50 years, is that at every generation of machine learning models, we realized that there was something fundamental that was misunderstood about intelligence. Every revolution, and there has been, dozens of them, the process is very incremental, let us realize that there was something really profound about intelligence that we were missing. And yes, by closing those gaps, progress are being made, and nowadays we have things that are giving us some spectacular results. But again, I would say the community in general, experts, people who do research in AI, it is extremely fuzzy, where we should go. You're throwing
mud at the wall to see what will stick.
Yes, exactly, and you're doing that with a blindfolded. So it's, for example, it's not clear that, I mean, pouring money on the case can make the thing worse. I mean, clearly, OpenAI was arguably quite distracted because they had too much money and they focused on mega models. So they were a little bit late to the party when it came to make the same LLMs, but much leaner. So you see, there is this myth that just because you can see a direction, like let's say the AI is the future, that any person has a clue on how to reach that. The interesting thing, generally speaking, with the market is that you will have thousands of people who will take risk, try stuff, and ultimately from this gigantic competition, something will ultimately emerge as a winner, and that's very good. The idea is that when you have the État stratège, you end up with things like France has, like the Minitel. France started, B2C internet. For those of the audience who know France tried to invent their own internet, which was run by the state, and it was just a complete catastrophe.
What was it
called? Minitel.
The Minitel.
But it's again, it's the sort of things where.
Yes.
It's just this idea that you can have the state that would, I would say, steer humanity forward. For me, even if it does happen, it can only happen on problems that are extremely, I would say, well understood, straightforward, where just a pure brute force approach to the problem. So just pour more resources, it will work. But if you have something which is many, many dimensional, it's very difficult. You see, it's very difficult, and you might end up with you might end up, it's for example, just we might end up with a situation where those AI are essentially, that would be the vision of Yann Lequin, open source, and so there is no value. So you have like your AI core is a piece that is open source. It is literally free, like no charge. And all the value is to be built on what you do with this AI. It's not clear that we will end up with a path where having complete control on the AI is going to grant any superiority to anybody. Just think of it. It could be just like, let's say, mathematics. Imagine that you have one country that end up producing all the mathematicians that prove all the theorems. This country would be a mathematical superpower. It proves all the theorems. But yeah, it's nice. But once those theorems are proven, everybody can enjoy the results of what they have published. Being a mathematical superpower doesn't translate into into actual power or actual wealth. So that would be, again, people would. There is another, I would say, sort of error of reasoning. It is that if you are the one who make the breakthrough, you're the one who is going to capture the added value. Well, not necessarily. Just like, again, think of it like mathematical superpower. It does not equate into leveraging all this mathematical knowledge to actually do something that will make countries richer.
But what you've essentially outlined is, in essence, the argument that Boster made about, again, superintelligence. I know we're not discussing the concept of superintelligence, but prior to achieving superintelligent AI, which at the time he wrote, he posited it would be somewhere in the middle of this century. But that was 10 years ago and pre-ChatGPT and the new generations of LLMs. But the point he was making was very much like what you said. There's obviously multiple steps along that way. Like, again, Gen AI will come, general artificial intelligence will come before superintelligence. But to get to that, there are steps that must be completed. And it is arguable, as you pointed out, you said, whoever has that is essentially a superpower. Once you have the monopoly on a skill set, if that skill set is valued, you are a superpower. And similarly, whoever gets farthest along the line, the vista of progress in terms of AI, arguably could be the most powerful, and that might be influencing some of the decisions you see.
Yeah, but again, that is pure speculation.
Absolutely speculation.
That yes. They will but also that there will be any moat. What I see is that
there will be any moat.
So okay. You see, if you end up discovering, and that has been very frequently the case in computer science, is that once the community reach a certain level of understanding. What was, I would say, an exclusive, superpower or incredible competency of just a few people somewhere on the globe, just become, something that is a commodity, and everybody can do that. And right now, when we look at what is happening with the developments of AI, it really seems to follow, to me, the exact same development patterns that I've seen for the last 50 years in computer science in general. It's very incremental. There are tons of super diverse contributors. So it's not like there is one team that is pioneering, that is like 5 years ahead and everybody is playing catch up. Its contributions comes from thousands of places. You have many papers that provide substantial contribution, but the person who is doing this contribution is like, this is their one significant paper, and that this is it. So what I see is that the most likely outcome will be, yes, humanity will keep progressing on this AI, just like we progress in I would say in mathematics, but there is no moat. Nobody possesses the knowledge of mathematics. Yes, some countries have more mathematicians than others. Yes, no problem. Some countries will end up leaving the names of their mathematicians on more theorems than others. That is true. But does it confer to the country who has the most mathematicians proving the most theorems, any kind of real superpower expressed in quality of living, access to material goods and whatnot? Absolutely not. You see, that's so my take here is that it's very unclear that that it will be able to capture that. I know that those investments are made at infrastructure, but again, we are making hardware investments for the next 5 to 10 years for models. We don't know what the models will look like. So maybe, there is I would say, a very important chance that it will be just, that it will be just mistakes and that money will be wasted. Again, I have no problem when Microsoft wants to invest in making more data centers. If they get it wrong and they build a data center that is not useful, that doesn't serve the market properly, it's okay. It will be the shareholders of Microsoft hitting that loss. My take is that it's really where I believe that it's very a distraction is that the idea that that essentially bureaucrats, elected or not, will be able to deploy what amounts to hundreds of billions of dollars or euros with any degree of efficiency on a topic like AI.
Perhaps not a lot about, which actually transitions to a key point because, again, I'm not an economist, but I've read a decent amount about decision-making theory and how if you take if you compare people's perceptions with small numbers and big numbers, they are radically different. So, for example, if I were to say to you, CEO of the company, if I were to say to you, hey, Johannes, last year we spent 12,000 euros on coffee in the break room, you might think that's an insane amount of money just because coffee, it's a quotidian thing, it's a daily thing. Should it be 10,000? Should it be 12,000? Should it be 5,000? I'm going to investigate that. But a CEO of another company, if I said your ERP upgrade will cost you 250 million, sounds about right. I mean, I don't really know how much should that cost. And similarly, to build 20 data centers, it's going to cost $500 billion. There's this tyranny when it comes to big numbers. And again, I think that's even more compounded when you have people, arguably, I don't know everyone involved in Stargate, for example, obviously not, but people involved in the decision-making process who might not have a lot of what you would call mechanical sympathy, an understanding of what's going on under the hood. And then they're told, hey, here is effectively a blank check, because $500 billion is effectively a blank check. Write whatever number you think is appropriate to build that. And my question then is essentially, how realistic is the expectation that that money can be deployed sensibly and will be of any benefit to the public in terms of, let's say, creation of jobs, in your opinion?
Again, there are, the expectation should be extremely low on this sort of front. First, if you look at, for example, jobs, statistics in the US show that they enjoy full employment, quasi. If you put aside people who went to jail in the US, you end up with what amounts to full employment. So the idea that you will create jobs, for me, when you have like full employment is strange. You might say, oh, we are going to have so much better jobs, but again, we have to think, is it really a realistic take? Because if someone is working in a pizzeria, yes, you might have a demand for a database administrator, and this job of database administrator would be better paid. But if the person is still working in a pizzeria, doing pizzas, and not as a much better paid, job administrating databases, it's probably a matter of competency. So you see, for me, the argument of job creation is completely orthogonal. Yeah. And especially in countries like the US that have like very low unemployment rates, it is I would say it's an argument of dubious merit to justify any investments. If we go to Europe, where we have higher unemployment rates, the reality is that most of those unemployments are just caused by regulations.
Actually, sorry, that's a key point.
So the thing is that if what prevents people from having a job is a piece of regulation, the proposition that making a massive investment on something is going to solve this problem, and no, those problems are completely independent. If you until you solve the regulation that is preventing people from having a job in the first place, you're not going to have those people employed. So that's just for the audience who is not really familiar with Europe. In many countries like France, Spain, Italy, it is almost impossible, for example, for companies to let go of their employees, so fire them. So as a result, all the companies have to be extremely conservative when it comes to hiring. So that creates a lot of friction, and to a large extent, unemployment can be explained by this sort of frictions, because countries who do not have this sort of friction, like let's say Switzerland, have a much lower rate of unemployment. But if we go, so again, that would be, for me, the argument is when you have investment, the idea that you're going to create jobs is, it's very, it's a very, I would say, weak proposition, especially when it's tax money funding those jobs, because it means you take money from regular people on one hand to give it to other people on the other hand. So it's obviously, when it's a private investment in the place where the investment is made, yes, it creates opportunity. But again, if we talk about public funds, it's money that is taken from taxpayer to be moved and given to other people at the end of the day. Now,
if I could actually jump in on that point, because something humorous happened on that note, and it builds on this point, because I wanted to be accurate with the information. I wanted to look up something that Anthony Miller had said on LinkedIn. Anthony Miller, friend of the channel, has a fantastic blog. Highly recommend people check it out. Wiser Log Tech. I opened up LinkedIn to get that exact information, and top of my feed is actually Anthony Miller posting about this exact same thing. Actually, a fresh post, but the one I wanted to draw attention to was one he said a few days ago, and get your perspective on it. Very similar point that he said, that in terms of particularly France, so it applies broadly across European states, but certainly France, because we're all in France, him included, made the point that this 200 billion funding, however it gets divided across states, won't necessarily lead to job creation in France. And the particular reason he cited was that France overall, as far as startups are concerned, over-regulated. It's perhaps a bit inhospitable to the startup environment. So I'm just curious, do you share that level of skepticism? I think you do.
I mean, yes. I mean, if you look at who is unemployed in France, the answer is it's not people who have IT skills or computer science skills. Those people are all employed. If we look at people who have like valuable market skills, especially when it comes to things that are like AI related or AI adjacent, we have 100% employment. Now, when we look in France, who are the people who are most unemployed? The answer are essentially young people with low education. That's, I think, if we go, we have something like 20% of unemployment for people who are below 25 years old, 25 years old, yes. And if we look at, I think France has currently...
Overall 7%, according to Google.
Yes, overall 7%.
Overall, yeah, but I don't have the...
But when you look at...
I don't have the actual
when you look at people who are below 25, it's like 20%.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to take into account that in France, we have, I think, 200,000 people studying at any given time sociology. So, I mean, France is producing, I say that as an employer.
I like Durkheim.
A vast amount of people who are unqualified for anything and everything. So, yes, question is, will AI solve this problem? I don't think so. But you see, if we look at why are those people unemployed, if the answer is because you've spent 5 years to learn sociology, which do not give you any skill that can be used realistically in any company for any purpose, the fact that France suddenly invests in AI is not going to solve this problem. So you were not employed before because your skill had no market value. AI doesn't fundamentally change that. So you see, again, if we talk about job creation, if it's just about, what people have in mind is that it's going to create jobs for the people who don't have jobs. But the reality is that people who have decent skills in France are employed almost 100% of them. So
And to be clear, actually, in many cases, anyone who has those skills in Europe, particularly France, if they're sufficiently fluent in English, they're often poached by startups in America. So I mean, there's America.
Exactly.
There's a brain
So
drain
again,
effect
when
there already.
if we discuss creation of jobs, it's the idea that if you're just creating a job for someone who has already a job, you're just shuffling.
It's a
Lateral
lateral
the
move,
cards.
essentially.
Exactly. So the question would be: are we going to solve the situation of people who are unemployed? And my answer is: there are tons of people in Europe who are unemployed, but those reasons have nothing to do with AI, and and they have nothing to do with what AI can do for Europe, the US, or the world. So my take is that even if AI, is very successful, it will not change anything for those people who do not have a jobs, for the exact same reason that people in the US who have, let's say, been convicted, went to jail multiple times, and struggle immensely for getting a job. That would be the same thing. Even if the country is immensely prosperous, the fate of those people is not going to be fundamentally different just because AI, we have an incredibly good AI doing a lot of valuable things for companies.
So, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but as a summary of that position, are you effectively of the opinion that from the average taxpayer's perspective in Europe, there's no value add to this?
There is no value add to this in Europe. I don't think there is either in the US. And if we look at more specifically, supply chains, I think for supply chain directors, do not look up to those programs as the place where innovation will happen. It would just be a gigantic waste of resources. Those consortium will be wasteful, they will be bureaucratic, and they will not spearhead the next generation of AI. And they can do in this regard, those consortiums can do even more damage than just wasting euros of taxes and dollars of taxes. They are also a gigantic distraction that can distort the perception of regular company executives in fooling them somehow in believing that this is the place where innovation will happen, where value will be created. My take, and I will be willing to bank money on it, is that it's not going to be the place where innovation happens. Innovation will keep happening, just not there.
Well, it's interesting because often when I try to press you to make predictions about what will happen, you keep the cards very close to your chest. You have been fulsome in your prognosticating today.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is that if you want to have me predicting where innovation will take place, I don't know. But still, we can still rule out a few places. Like, is the next AI revolution coming from North Korea? Unlikely, very unlikely. Is it going to come from, I would say, governmental bureaucrats? Unlikely, very unlikely, just like North Korea. So you see, we can. It's not because I cannot make a precise prediction that I can't rule out a few things that are still, when you look at history, extremely, extremely unlikely.
So 12 months from now, you don't think that Europe will have built anything, let alone achieved enormous strides?
It can, but if it does, it will not be thanks to those investments. You see, that's the thing with innovation; it can be very erratic, and so innovation can happen, pretty much anywhere. But obviously, some countries have, I would say, a lot of very skilled manpower. If you look at, for example, Switzerland is a hotspot for this sort of talents. So the odds that such a company would emerge, for example, in Switzerland, are not bad.
Tax havens.
Yes, I mean, but not just tax havens. I mean, if you have like the ETH, for example, university is excellent. I mean, there are plenty of places where you have like excellent technical universities.
France,
yes.
We've hosted many.
Yes, but so my take is that again, most obviously the primary candidate is the US, just because they have the most momentum, they have the biggest communities, they have the most experts and everything. But again, even if progress keeps coming from the US, my prognostic is that it will have like nothing to do with those mega investments steered by the federal administrations. That's my take. Success will most likely happen from the US, just because, well, they have been dominating the field for quite a few decades. But will this success be the consequence of those mega investments that involve their federal government? I generally do not think so.
All right. Well, we've been going for almost an hour, so I'm going to start wrapping up. But in terms of closing thoughts, what would you like to say before we finish, Johannes?
I would say, don't get to supply chain directors, or IT directors watching us. Don't get distracted. Those things are just a waste of time. They will unfortunately be a waste of your money, but that you can't do anything about this part because that's your taxes.
Revolt?
But very difficult.
We are not advocating that. Legally, no. I'm obliged to say.
But at least what you can do, what is in your power, is to make sure that it's not a complete distraction for you. So my suggestion is that pay attention to what is happening, but don't get distracted by those mega investments. Most likely nothing will come out, and stay, I would say, very attentive to things that are very specific to your domain. That seems to be getting traction in doing something real for your use cases instead of chasing super intelligence and whatnot.
All right, well, Johannes, I don't have any other questions. Thank you very much for your time. I've enjoyed the conversation. I hope other people have as well. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.